when I started reading this, it's one of these things in your life, when you read it, you'll never forget it. All right, I'll never forget this. I'll never forget it because of the implications involved in it. First of all, it's the testimony of an honorable man. Admiral, he's an admiral. He's gone on now, but Admiral Byrd, Richard Byrd. Here's the man who flew over the North Pole and was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I read the statement attached to that, how that he risked his life and so forth. He flew over the South Pole. That's not all he did, though. After the war, he led an expedition to South America with over 4,000 troops and 8, 9, 10, 12 warships. And it was called Operation High Jump. Never heard of it. But when you find out about one thing, it leads to another thing. What the fuck? Well, let's get into it quickly because you're wondering what's going on. The man's an aviator. He's a pilot. And he leaves at 0600 hours. That's 6 o'clock in the morning for folks that, you know, if you're not familiar with a 24-hour clock. 0600 is 6 o'clock in the morning. He flies out and he headed north. He gives updates as to his flight, to turbulence that he gets in the air. He drops his altitude, raises his altitude, standard procedures of any pilot. And he does this, and he talks about how he does it, and continues to fly. He has constant radio checks with his base, so they'll know where he is. They keep up with him. And back in those days, they didn't have GPS and all of that stuff, so they flew by what's called dead reckoning a lot of times. And pilots know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about dead reckoning. He continues to talk to them until he gets down, until he comes. He's flying over the ice. He's flying over the North Pole. And what do you expect to see? Nothing but ice. That's what you expect to see. One sheet of ice after another sheet, just solid white ice, snow, the North Pole. Until he sees a creature down below, which looks to him like a mammoth, and he drops his altitude to about 1,400 feet, and it is a mammoth. And this begins to really get his attention. He sees a mountain range, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, so now he's been in the air for 4 hours, he says he crosses over the small mountain range, and still proceeding northward as best can be ascertained, beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There should be no green valley below, no green valley in the Arctic, no green valley. And something is definitely wrong and abnormal here, he says. We should be over ice and snow. To the port side, port is left, starboard is right. To the port side are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning, and the reason they're spinning is because he's approaching magnetic north. And the magnetic pole, if you ever get around the magnetic pole, you forget your magnetic compass. It's not going to work because the magnetism is so intense, and the movement is so great that it's no use to you. But in any event, he says his navigational instruments are spinning, the gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. Then he sees this beneath, and he says, at 1,400 feet, and I execute a sharp left turn to better examine the valley below. It is green with either moss or some type of tight-knit grass. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn, and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible, he says, yet there it is. He decreases his altitude to 1,000 feet and he takes binoculars to better examine the animal. It is confirmed it is definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. At 10:30 hours, he encountered more rolling green hills. The external temperature indicator reads 74 degrees Fahrenheit. He's in the North Pole. Continuing on our heading now, navigation instruments seem normal now. I'm puzzled over their actions. Attempt to contact base camp, radio is not functioning. And now what follows is one of the most incredible things I've ever read in my life. And let me put it in the context of this. When Satan showed the Lord Jesus Christ the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, he did just that. He has power. And there are things going on that there is absolutely no physical definition or logical reasoning to, but the existence of it cannot be denied. And this is what's happening here. In 11:30 hours, countryside below is more level than normal. If I may use that word, ahead we spot what seems to be a city. This is impossible. Aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. My God, he says, off our port and starboard wings, a strange type of aircraft. They're closing rapidly alongside. They're disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It is a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? I tug at the controls again. They will not respond. We're caught in an invisible vice grip of some type. 11:35 hours, our radio crackles and a voice comes through in what appears to, in English, with what appears to be a slight Nordic or Germanic accent. The message is, welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral. You are in good hands. I note the engines of our plane have stopped running. The aircraft is under some strange control and is now turning itself. The controls are useless. In plainer words, he's been taken over completely. Now, up to this point, you're going to say to yourself, well, this is a madman. Or you may say to yourself, I know the power of the devil. I know how he can deceive. And what follows, he is taken into a city by blonde-haired men who look like these Aryans that Hitler and the rest of them were talking about in Germany. And then he's finally taken to their leader. And when he's taken to their leader, he has a conversation with him. He's their master. And that master tells him that essentially that they've been observing us on top of the earth where we live for a long time, and that we have gotten to the point by killing each other. And they're talking about the atomic bomb that had just been recently dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know those two. This happened in 1947, I think this happened. And they were saying that we are going to have to do something with the people who dwell on earth. They tell Admiral Byrd that he's an honorable man, and he asks him, why am I here? They said, because you're chosen to be here. You're a man that we can trust. We're going to tell you what's happening. We're going to tell you all of this. They tell him. They send him back. So he goes back and he tells his superiors. And apparently they tell him to hush this up. This stays hushed until right before he dies, this diary comes out. Because he says, I cannot leave this world without letting humanity know what has happened. I cannot leave. I must tell them what happened. Before we go any further, let's ask ourselves some questions. Number one, did he write this diary? Is this Admiral Byrd's diary? Did he really write this? Number two, if he really did write this, and this is legitimate, this is his diary, then something obviously happened to this man when he was over the North Pole. Something happened. Something obviously happened to this man. Number three, regardless of whatever happened to this man, he's convinced something happened to him, so it's incumbent upon us, what did happen to him when he was over the North Pole? All right? If you press this thing a little further and do a little more studying into it, you'll find out that there's an awful lot of people out there that believe the earth is hollow, that there's not a molten mass in it like they say. Now, if you're a Bible believer, you know this. You know that the heart of this earth, hell, is located. If you believe the Bible, all right? If you believe the Bible. And if you believe the Bible, the book of Revelation makes it very plain that the bottomless pit, which is hell, was opened, and out of that pit came these creatures upon the earth. They're coming out on the earth. They're coming out on the face of the earth. Now, that's a wild thing. This is why a lot of churches in this country, an awful lot of churches in this country, absolutely refuse to read or study the book of Revelation or preach from it, because it has some things in it that just literally blow your mind. And that's one of them, talking about creatures coming up out of the bottomless pit, Apollyon and Abaddon and all of that. But if I'm a Bible believer, I believe it's real. All right. You can get off and you can get way out in left field with a hollow earth theory. All right. And you can get in deep into all of this stuff that I'm just kind of going to I'm just going to present it to you this morning in the context of what we're studying, because we're studying a deceit that's coming on this earth of unbelievable proportions. A deceit, all right, a deceit. Now, we know that Adolf Hitler, when he was Chancellor of Germany, was deep into the occult. We know they didn't do anything unless they consulted their occult masters and prognosticators and what have you. And that the German high command, Himmler and men like that, even Himmler himself was far more into the occult than Hitler, and Hitler was head over heels into it, but Himmler was deep into it. These men were guided every moment of their life by an occult satanic power and spirit. Germany did definitely develop during World War II some of the highest technology on the earth. I saw this the other day on the History Channel, and I didn't know this. Nobody had ever told me this, but this is what the History Channel reported, that two German scientists in the 30s, these two German scientists had split the atom. Now think hard on that. Think hard on that. And it was the German scientists, Werner von Braun, men like that, who got America into space. That's a fact, folks. That's a fact. No question about that. The only reason they didn't put them to death at Nuremberg with the trials was because they needed them. And so they needed their technology, what have you. Anyway, Germany apparently was way ahead of the rest of the world in some of this technology. Germany had a society called the Vril Society, V-R-I-L. How many's ever heard that term? Most people haven't, but a few of you have, all right? That's an occult society. But the premise of the Vril Society was this: they were able to tap into satanic power and apply it to physical things. See? They were able to tap into to occult power. They called it whatever force they called it. We know what it is. The power is either of God or the devil. But they tapped into it, and they were able to apply it to physical things. There are photographs of flying saucers the Germans made. I've seen them. But they're not flying saucers like the classic example of them. But they are flying saucers. In other words, they are propelled by a propulsion system that was unknown by most of the world at that time. But in any event, the bottom line is that the Germans had tapped into the occult world and had begun to build this system based on what they were getting from the occult world. And that system was this: they believed that in the north, that there was an entrance into a hollow earth, and that spirit beings lived there that were vastly superior to us, and that these spirit beings were our forefathers. And that's what Hitler was trying to do, was to try to bring the race back, the Aryan race, back to its roots, back to what it should be. And this is why the root race theory is so important when you get into this stuff. You remember I told you about the root race? You remember which one I told you the Aryan was? There's 7 of them. 5, exactly. 5. It's number 5. It's the 5th. And this root race theory, the Theosophists taught it. Blavatsky in Russia taught it. All of this evolutionary, spiritual evolutionary that brings this super race, this super identity. These people believe that. The evolution, when you talk about biological evolution, all right, you're talking about what they teach at UT and all the major colleges in the world. They teach biological evolution. What is biological evolution? That's what Charles Darwin taught, right? All right, that's simple enough on the surface of it for people to relate to. Biological evolution. I don't believe it, but that's what they teach. All right. Then there is social evolution. All right. Political correctness is a product of social evolution. What's social evolution? Well, if biological evolution is true, then social evolution is where the masses and humanity and governments are able learn how to live in peace and blah blah and so forth. In plain words, social evolution means that there must be a one world government for men to live. That's social evolution. See, that's not biological evolution. But the idea is that if evolution is true, they believe it is, then therefore that justifies the idea, well, men must live together. Then there is this esoteric, this spiritual, this stuff here we're talking about that Admiral Byrd saw. There is that type of evolution, and this gets into the mystical category of it, because this gets into that highbrow stuff about the spirit beings that are channelers and guides and are communicating with people. And the U.S. government would never tell you this, but they've had all kinds of experiments into this, and they've got labs, and they've got underground labs, and they're doing experimentation into this stuff, and all of this is going on right now, and people go off on the deep end when they get into it, and you got to be awful careful with it, because you can get into this stuff and you can become possessed by these spirits, because these are demons, and these demons are smart. Admiral Byrd saw something. I don't doubt that for a minute. But he did not see a civilization of advanced beings that had evolved to that point. What he saw was either an apparition or a physical manifestation of some spirit power that's demonic. That's what he saw. But it blows my mind to begin to realize how powerful it is. What I'm going to say to you this morning, I want to say it to you, and I want you to take it to heart. When the deception comes, if you're not a born-again believer, you'll be swept away with it. The deception will be greater than you ever imagined in your life. It is going to be profound as to what happens. When Ted Gunderson talked about, now put it together, he talked about people in the high places are Satanists. What he's talking about, they're Illuminati. He's talking about spiritual power in high places that will bring about a one world government. And by doing that, they intend to rule the world. And they have the help of a whole, I don't know, what do you call it, a mass of demonic spirits who are able to perform all kinds of miracles, deceptive miracles, manifestations, and all of this stuff to help them to bring about that one world government. And the goal is so that they can put one man up and worship him as God, the Antichrist. Now, there is a mind behind all of it. There's a mind directing it, and that mind is the devil, Lucifer. He wants worship. He wants worship. He covets worship. He does. And money's nothing to him. And the souls of men, and power's nothing to him. He's got power. He covets worship. That's why he said to the Lord Jesus Christ, you fall down and worship me, and I'll give you the kingdoms of the world. He covets it. Now when you look around yourself, and what I'm talking about, you know, I've talked about Byrd, and I've talked about this other stuff. You got to ask yourself the question, well, how long is it going to be then? I mean, they've got all this technology, they got all this stuff going. How long is it going to be before they bring this together and they do it? They're already doing it. It's already happening. It's already happening. When you look outside, how many of you have noticed these little antennas that have a square box on top of them? That's ELF. That's an ELF antenna. You know what that's for? Ostensibly, it's for this. Send frequencies into your head, and you wonder, why is it that I'm thirsty? Or why would I like to have an ice cream? Or what? You know, all of a sudden this desire hits you. It's because they're feeding this stuff into your brain. Now you say, well, now that's crazy, preacher. You know, they wouldn't do that. The government wouldn't do that. Would they?
Worlds Beyond the Poles, Physical Continuity of the Universe. This book was published in 1959. These days the book sells on eBay for around $500. I was blown away by this book. If you research stuff like Flat Earth or Hollow Earth, you have to read this book. Let me read the first page of the book, which is very telling. The following pages contain the first and only description of the realistic universe of land, water, oxygen and vegetation, where human and other forms of animal life abound. This is not a work of fiction, nor is it a technical analysis of anything. It is a simple recital of fact which transcends the most elaborate fiction ever conceived. It is diametrically opposed to the assumptions and mathematical conclusions of theorists and technicians throughout the ages. It is truth. These pages describe the physical land routes from the Earth to every land area of the universe about us, which is all land. Such routes extend from beyond the North Pole and South Pole, so-called ends of the Earth, as agreed by theory. It will here be shown that there are no northern or southern limits to the Earth. It will thereby be shown where movement straight ahead from the pole points and on the same level as the Earth permits of movement into celestial land areas appearing up or out from the Earth. A basic version of this book was written and has been expounded at American universities between 1927 and 1930. Since then, the US Naval Research Bureau and the US Navy have conclusively confirmed the work's principal features. Since December of 1928, US Navy polar expeditions have determined the existence of land extent beyond both pole points, out of bounds of the assumed isolated globe, Earth as postulated by the Copernican theory. On January 13 of 1956, as this book was being prepared, a US Naval Air Unit penetrated the extent of 2,300 miles beyond the assumed South Pole end of the Earth. That flight was always over land and water and ice. For very substantial reasons, the memorable flight received negligible press notice. The United States and more than 30 other nations prepared unprecedented polar expeditions for 1957 and 1958 to penetrate land now proved to extend without limit beyond both pole points. This work provides the first account of why it is unnecessary to attempt shooting up or out from the terrestrial level for a journey to any of the astronomically named celestial land areas. It relates why such attempt would be futile. These pages present evidence that the same atmospheric density of this Earth prevails throughout the entire universe. Such a feature proves that, except for the presence of a gaseous sky envelope and underlying oxygen content equivalent to that of the Earth, we could never observe the luminous celestial areas designated as a star or planet. The observed luminous areas of the universe about us represent celestial sky areas, and they are as continuous and connected as all areas of this Earth's continuous and connected sky. Hence, it is shown that there are no globular or isolated bodies to be found throughout the entire universe. They are elements of lens deception. This work is radically and rightfully opposed to astronomical conclusions of all ages. It depicts the illusion developing from all telescopic observations and photographs. It clearly explains and vividly illustrates why those lens-developed illusions have been mistakenly accepted as facts. This work projects man's first understanding of the factual and endless universe, which contains human life throughout its vast length and width, regardless of all abstract theory to the contrary. This book claims to be non-fiction based on facts. Endless land with human life beyond poles? No one is talking about this book on YouTube. I only found 2 good videos so far, one from Chippy the Chipmunk and another great video from Flat Drop. I will link these videos in the description. Here are some other interesting parts I took out of the book. February of 1947. I'd like to see that land beyond the pole. That area beyond the pole is the center of the great unknown. Admiral Richard Byrd before his 7-hour flight over land beyond the North Pole. November of 1955. This is the most important expedition in the history of the world. Admiral Richard Byrd before departing to explore land beyond the South Pole. January of 1956. 13 members of the United States expedition accomplished a flight of 2,700 miles from the base at McMurdo Station, which is 400 miles west of the South Pole, and penetrated a land extent of 2,300 miles beyond the pole. Most of you probably know about the interview Admiral Byrd gave on the television. Here is a small part of it.
Our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
There is no physical end to the Earth's northern and southern extent. There is no space between areas of the universe, but there must deceptively appear to be space in all observations. That apparent space results from the illusory globularity and isolation of the celestial sky areas. The concept that the universe is made out of globular and isolated bodies originated from the curvature that is created by all lenses. The bodies are an illusion. The ancient conclusion of Galileo that luminous celestial areas are isolated from each other and are circling in space was founded on the inescapable errors of lens functioning. The circling movement is an illusion. In an endless land and sky universe, the undulating or billowing of luminous sky gas must deceptively appear as a circling or ellipsing movement. The deceptive appearance develops from the fact that such gaseous sky movement is detected by a circular lens. Under the mobile sky gas, which extend throughout the celestial realm, there is undetectable but very factual land, water, vegetation and life like on this earth or realm. Optical illusions result from the function of the human eye lens, and all photographic and telescopic lenses are patterned after the optic lens. Lens function demands lens convergence, which causes the deceptive curvature created by the lens into disc-like proportion reflecting the roundness of all lenses. Every area of the Earth's continuous and unbroken outer sky surface would express the identical deceptions when observed and photographed from high altitude and from celestial land areas. In 1927, science was without knowledge that any terrestrial sky area would be luminous when observed from beyond the sky. The first observation and photograph was archived by Professor Auguste Piccard in 1931. I made a video about him recently. Piccard had not achieved sufficient altitude for a completely dark stratosphere background, which would probably express outer sky luminosity. That disk development, which was referred to as an upturned disk, was partial only because sufficient distance had not been archived from the gaseous sky area. Photographs that were taken in 1946 with V2 rockets at an altitude of around 65 miles showed a deceptive disc-like and isolated sky area over White Sands, New Mexico and adjacent territory. These rocket camera photographs at greater altitudes hold most sensational confirmation of physical continuity. The stars and planets are connected luminous celestial sky areas with underlying land. The Earth cannot be circumnavigated north and south. A few around the world flights have contributed to popular misconception that the Earth has been circumnavigated north and south. All progressive movement beyond the pole points leads beyond the assumed end of the globe Earth, and that land beyond constitutes a land connection with the celestial. The connecting land appearing up or out from terrestrial points other than the poles is attainable by movement straight ahead from the imaginary pole points. This is not 1927. The existence of worlds beyond the poles have been confirmed by US naval exploration during the 30 years since then. According to this book, this is an illustration of the universe. Understand that this is not a shape of the real universe, but it illustrates how we see the universe. The way our eyes work creates this illusion. Here is another illustration. We live on the bottom on the terrestrial land surface, and above us is a layer of air and oxygen. Above that we have curved parts that represent the sky areas, which are luminous when viewed from above. Above that we have the stratosphere, and above that we have the celestial level that is the same as the terrestrial. As above, so below. Since up is always relative, our celestial cousins look up or out through their inner blue sky as we do through ours, and behold the same nightly star pattern that we witness. Contrary to popular misconception based on the illusory shooting up or out from any location of the terrestrial or celestial would take the explorer away from the universe structure and project him into infinite space. Place your thumb on the illustration's stratosphere section, then draw it towards you. That will describe where the space explorer would go. If he did not land back on some land area of the terrestrial, he would be completely lost in space wherein the universe was constructed. Or he would be projected up on some terrestrial area remote from the point of flight origin. Any spaceship launched, and there is no doubt that it could be launched, would either be lost in space infinite or be returned to some area of the Earth. The universe is so ordered that power increase to overcome the arc of flight would precipitate the spaceship away from the universe. On the other hand, insufficient power would restrict the spaceship to the movement of all projectiles, and it would have to conform to the arc of flight, which would return it to some land area of the terrestrial. Up is always relative to the position we hold anywhere in the universe structure. When we stand on the land up there, this terrestrial land we have left behind will have to appear to be up to our observation from a celestial area. Sitting in the nose of a rocket that is at an altitude of 500 miles from Earth's surface will have lost sight of where it entered the dark stratosphere. Then, wherever we look, we will observe the luminous points astronomically designated. As we look at the sky area covering the land surface we departed from, there will be seen the same luminous points that envelop us from every angle of observation. Then, as altitude is increased, the lights of the celestial will bear no areas. And as the universal skylight will not be arranged in a greater relation of up, the lights of the terrestrial sky direct course over and under our rocket, but will appear at every angle. Up is in fact everywhere. The so-called heavens above are everywhere. The factor of ice covering for polar areas results from the positions of such areas in relation to the universe whole, and from the distribution of magnetic forces throughout the universe. The magnetic dispensation varies in accordance with the natural laws governing its universal distribution. The scripting material dealing with Antarctica mentions that penguins and whales abound in this previously assumed desolate area of ice and eternal darkness, and that the mountains hold a fortune in coal and ores. As land, mountains, minerals and animal life are found to constitute the Antarctic area this side of the South Pole, land, vegetation and life are to be found as progress is made beyond the pole. At that particular pole point and for a distance beyond are experienced the most intense winds and blizzards, which act as a barrier to progress beyond the Earth. Such conditions seem to be an expression of divine will, which demands that terrestrial man be receptive to cosmic values before he is permitted to penetrate the ice barrier. Beyond the barrier will be found a warmer climate with land and waterways. And it is there that celestial cousins await terrestrial man's arrival. And if one asks how far beyond, it will suffice to record that the distance is negligible with modern transportation speed. The universe is not constructed in the manner of an enormous pinwheel, nor is any area thereof globular or spherical in reality, nor is any area isolated from its neighboring area. Areas of the flywheel universe as shown in this illustration could readily be drawn to the cylindrical. Then every connected land area of the celestial and the terrestrial could be undulating through the power of every area's magnetic energy. The undulating would be toward and away from the Sun, and the Sun would be moving in its unchanging course along the entire universe structure. The Sun's continuous movement along the universe course would at one season of our terrestrial year be toward the terrestrial area. At another period of the year it would be moving away from the terrestrial areas. There is land under all celestial and terrestrial skylight. There are no globular bodies in motion. Ever-active sky gases are responsible for all detected motion which the lens detects. They also influence the spectrum. Duality of gas motion can exist, but duality of bodies can never exist. This was embraced as early as 1927. It was disclosed that every sky area of Earth would, through the motion of gaseous content, deceptively appear to be circling or revolving. What if this book is reality? What if it's true? Can you imagine what would happen if the people find out about this? I don't know if it's true or not, but for me it was a very interesting book to read. I made this video so that you know what the book is about, and I hope some more people will read it and maybe make a video about it. Anyway, big thanks to watch it. Before I go, one more thing I want to say. I started a new website called fefriends.com, which stands for Flat Earth Friends. It's a website where you can meet other flat earthers. I made it so that people can find each other and share information, maybe make new friends. That's what it's all about. If you're interested, check it out. If not, thanks for watching the video and bye bye.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing? Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow. Is that very definitely planned, or is that... that is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, to the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.